Hey guys, how's it going? The Haggard Nerd here with a cider making Q&A video. You guys have been asking questions about cider making, so I'm making some videos to answer your questions. Let's see what you guys are asking. In this cider making Q&A video, John Carpenter says, I really like your sink setup. Does the water temperature affect any of the steps for sanitizing? What is the alcohol content of a new batch? Does light affect the finished product? Is there a limit on how long to leave a batch sitting before consuming? Can batches be combined, and would that affect the taste? So we got a bunch of great questions here. Thank you. Appreciate your input, John, and your questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these one by one and give you the best answer that I can possibly provide on each of these. Okay, so for the first question, does water temperature affect any of the steps for sanitizing? I'm not really sure that it does. I personally like to use hot water because in my mind, the water is getting pasteurized in the hot water tank. So the water coming out of the tank would be more sanitary than straight cold water coming in from the city or from the well or wherever. The Star San directions actually don't say anything about using hot water or cold water. I think the important thing here is that you just do use sanitizer. So for the second question, what is the alcohol content of a new batch? The best answer to this question that I can give is to check your hydrometer before you start your fermentation. The way you calculate ABV is to take your initial, what is called starting gravity reading, and then check your final gravity after the fermentation has fully completed. There are a number of calculators online you can use to calculate the ABV from there. If you're interested in adjusting your final alcohol content, you can add additional dextrose or other fermentable sugars to your cider before you pitch the yeast to boost the sugars the yeast can consume. But what I've found is that ciders are usually sweet enough to ferment as is and will usually come out anywhere between 6% to 8% ABV on their own. This is all really has to do with the type of apples used to make the juice, since some apples have higher sugar contents than others. All right, so for the next question, does light affect the finished product? The only thing here that I would warn against is sunlight. Sunlight has UV rays that could harm your yeast and potentially change the flavors of your cider. I don't have any science to back this up, but it's mainly just a good rule of thumb to let your cider ferment and age in a cool, dark area. And the fewer interactions your cider has with the outside world, the more stable it will be. So for the next question, is there a limit on how long to leave a batch sitting before consuming? I've done a bit of digging and I can't really find anyone giving a definitive answer on this. From what I can tell, a cider can sit and age for years without any issues if, number one, your initial process was sanitary and didn't introduce any bad yeast or bacteria. Number two, you were careful not to introduce oxygen when racking. Number three, your cider has absolutely no contact with oxygen while aging. And number four, your cider can sit without being disturbed for long periods of time. On a side note, if you have a CO2 canister available, you can add a protective oxygen-free blanket of CO2 on top of your cider when racking. Since CO2 is denser than oxygen, it will actually fall and rest on top of the cider, pushing any oxygen up and away from your cider. That'll keep your cider stable and safe while aging. So for the last question, can batches be combined and would that affect taste? Absolutely. Commercial cider makers do this on a normal basis to get the flavor profiles they're looking for. Blending can add complexity to your cider and produce interesting results, depending on what you blend together. Personally, I have a cider that I've made with champagne yeast that has been sitting for over 4 years that is very smooth, but also very dry. Unfortunately, it doesn't have much flavor. I think this is due to the juice I used. I plan on blending that with another batch that I've also had sitting for about 4 years. That is a cider that had ginger mixed in, but ended up being very heavy on the ginger flavor. So I'm thinking about blending these together, and that should smooth things out on both sides, making a very tasty, balanced cider. Alright guys, this pretty much does it for this video. Please keep in mind this is all my personal take on everything. I'm not a pro, but I'm only sharing what I know to be true and basing everything on my process that I've developed over the past 50 batches. If you're watching this and would like to add to the conversation, or if I was wrong about something, I'd love to hear from you. That way we learn together. If you guys have any questions, comments, corrections, or anything at all to share, make sure you leave them down in the comments below, and I'll be making more of these Q&A videos based on the feedback I get. So thanks to you, John, for the questions and comments. And guys, as always, thanks for watching. Take care.